minutes together and let's make it all worthwhile. Shavuot is what many people refer to as the forgotten holiday. So you have to ask yourself, why do most people know about Passover? They know about Rosh Hashanah. Most people know about Hanukkah. But the principle of Shavuot, I have to admit that for many, many years, I didn't know it existed and I didn't have a clue what it was. And yet, when you really consider it, Shavuot is the holiday that changed not just the Jewish people and made us into a nation, but it actually changed the entire world. Particularly when you see that, on the most part, people will say Judeo-Christian values, but everything that we call today morality, decency, good conduct, humanism, all of those things ride on the back of what happened on Shavuot, the Shabbat of Shavuot. Shavuot, many of you may know, means in Hebrew weeks. And the reason it's called weeks is because there is no specific date recorded in the Torah. Rather, you calculate it by counting 7 weeks of 7, or 49 plus 1 days after Pesach. Now, I'm just going to give you a quick reasoning for that to help you understand how deeply significant it is. When we left Egypt, we were a slave nation. And a slave nation implies that more than just physical enslavement, we suffered from the deepest enslavement of all. And that enslavement can be called a psychic or emotional enslavement, where you see yourself, your dreams, your feelings, your perceptions as less than your own. For all the 200 and odd years that we spent in Egypt, after we were oppressed and suppressed, we left physically, but we didn't leave psychologically. Now, this can be compared, for example, to a person who leaves a relationship where they are perhaps feeling abused. And they go out into the world and find themselves in short order going out with or dating or, God forbid, marrying someone who's just like who they were with. Because the world base operates on patterns. And if you're not hyper conscious of what your patterns are, there is a good chance that you are doomed to repeat those patterns. So a person needs more than just physically to leave a place of enslavement. They need also to psychologically and emotionally leave that place of enslavement. But when we left as a nation, we were free physically, but psychologically, we were not free. I often think of the brilliant Anatoly Sharansky, who became Natan Sharansky, who really exercised freedom while he was in the Gulag, where he wrote and explained that even though he was in a prison cell, it was the first time in his life that he felt truly liberated, because he discovered and realized that his soul and his mind could never be owned by his captors. And in fact, many of you probably know that when he was finally liberated from the prison in the Gulag, they told him, get out and cross the road right away. And he refused to leave his cell until he had his book of Tehillim, his book of Psalms, where he studied and learned and got comfort all those years he was in prison. And he said, I'm not leaving unless you give me my book back. And they were essentially, are you nuts? You have freedom and now you're waiting for a stupid book that you can get another one of? He said, I'm not leaving without my book. In essence, what he was saying is, you never had me. I was not your prisoner. I leave, I don't leave, you don't own me. And so they finally got him his book, and then they told him, you have to walk across this bridge that was going to the airfield that was going to take him to Israel. And they said to him, you walk in a straight line directly across the street into that waiting carrier. And he intentionally, this skinny guy with his pants held up with a rope, he'd lost so much weight, intentionally walking in a zigzag formation across the bridge. It's a very famous story. You could probably still find it on YouTube. In essence, what Sharansky was saying is, I don't feel enslaved by you. I'm not in such a hurry to go because you never had me. So there is a fundamental difference between freedom from and freedom to. And that's why this holiday is deeply connected by these 7 weeks to Passover, because it is not enough to be liberated physically. It is not enough to just be free, because freedom, without freedom too, without purpose, without structure, without laws, without culture, can become chaotic. All you have to do is watch what happens to a small child when you give them too much freedom, no boundaries, and no rules. They abuse that. They eat candy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They end up with terrible stomach pains. All of us who went off to college and drank till we vomited 3 nights a week, who ate endless pizza, who can't look at tequila today. Freedom, as we perceive it, the license to do whatever we want, is not the Jewish definition of freedom. From a Jewish psychological and spiritual perspective, freedom is defined by being able to actualize and realize your potential as a human being. To actualize your potential and to live on all cylinders. And for a Jew to actualize their potential, they need to understand how they're made. They need to understand the owner's manual. Many of you have heard me tell the story about driving that minivan for years without realizing that there was a heated back window, and living in the middle of Canada and scraping off my windshield with a credit card, freezing my hands like ice in the middle of winter, simply because I never opened the owner's manual of this used car and discovered that, my God, all along I had to press a particular button. It was the early iteration of these things, and so of course it wasn't readily apparent. The Torah means instructions for living. It is the fundamental owner's manual of the human being, of the Jew. It is the place where you learn what you are capable of when you blend the physical and the metaphysical. And yes, we can live our entire lives on a purely physical plane and have a perfectly decent and good life. There is no question. You can. But good doesn't have to be good enough. We aspire to greatness. We aspire to greatness, and this is probably the reason why, while we are less than 1/4% of the world's population, 27 to 29% of all world prizes belong to the Jews. Because aspiration, that is our way. How do we know what we're capable of? Well, the first piece of it is knowing that you are connected to a force greater than yourself. That you are like a ray, a sunbeam, attached to the sun. That in your life, you have the capacity to go, like Sharansky, beyond your body and to live at a level of excellence that includes your soul. These are the highest levels of pleasure known to mankind. And I would know this because I have always been a pleasure seeker. My entire life, from as early as I can remember, my goal was more sensuality, more food, more music, more dancing, more laughter, more fun. I had just never learned that there is more joy when you are both a body and a soul. So we left the desert, we left Egypt, and we wandered through the desert. And during that period of time, during that 49-day period, we moved through the maturity and ability to receive. What does that mean? Well, I can't be the only one among us who met men over the years when I was still dating, who were just too nice to me, who just liked me too much. I wasn't ready to receive love, so I would always push those away. And I can't tell you how many men there are out there who come to me now in their 50s saying, I never met my beshert. And I say, yeah, you did. You met a million of her. But she wasn't quite perfect enough or right enough because you weren't ready to truly receive love. You were still stuck entirely in your body. And so when we left a slave nation, during those 7 weeks, we go through, and today our practice is to go through the Kabbalistic tree of life, the emotive characteristics of the human condition, where we really dissect and intersect all the things that make us human, our emotive characteristics, so that we can get ourselves to a place where when we stand at the foot of a mountain and God calls out to us and says, I can make you my nation. Here's what it's all about. then we can say famously, Naseh v'nishma. We will do, and then we will understand. So let's back up. We leave Egypt, we go through the desert, we're attacked by a rogue nation, we go through complaining and difficulties and so on, but by the time we get to the foot of Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, we are like one man with one heart. We are collectively yearning to meet with, to hear from the very entity that kept us safe through this desert, this entity that showed us those plagues in Egypt, this entity that took us on the wings of an eagle out of slavery and towards freedom. Freedom too. Now, it was at Har Sinai that we got the Torah and, of course, the 10 Commandments, which are the 10 statements that are subsets of all of the 613 existing commandments known to man. So here's the thing. A lot of people will say, freedom? That's freedom? We went from not having any responsibilities and obligations, doing what we're told, and we called that slavery. And now, 50 days later, we're standing here and you can't do this and you can't eat this and you can't watch this and you can't go here and you can't say this and you can't do it like this and you can't, you should. How can that be freedom? How can freedom exist within rules? So this is a powerful question, and probably the one that best explains and defines why freedom was engraved on our hearts with the engravement of those tablets that Moses brought to us. Because there is no freedom without boundaries. Perfect example. A bunch of children are playing on the top of a mountain peak. They've got a ball, they're tossing it around, they're playing soccer, they're playing football, but every 2 seconds the ball goes flying off the mountain's edge and they can't play. Or better yet, the park near my house, where my kids grew up, it never used to have a fence around it. So if my children wanted to play, I was constantly looking around, trying to make sure that there was nobody coming in and grabbing them, that their ball, if it was kicked, didn't go out into the street and they would be tempted to run after it. Eventually, the Homeowners Association got together and they built a fence around this park. And once they did, we mothers, we could sit and relax and enjoy easily, because the fence does not always keep us in. Mostly, it keeps us safe. A fence around a marriage is another example. How can this be? Well, you don't love your spouse so much that you say, honey, I'm so crazy about you. You just go out and do whatever you want with whomever you want, okay? It's all good. We don't do that, because commitment is also a fence, and we yearn for it, because, as the famous poet E. Cummings said, man moves more freely in a harness. Now, we know that Judaism is not all or nothing at all. We know and we understand that every connective step we take is ours for eternity, even if there's a gazillion things we don't do. But the entire universe heard about this revelation at Sinai, because in this case, there wasn't just one witness. It wasn't just a few guys on the road to Damascus who saw a resurrection. It wasn't one guy, Brigham Young, standing in a field in Utah. It wasn't just one or two. It was hundreds of thousands of people who experienced this revelation. So it's no surprise that one of the first things Moses was told to do when we arrived at Mount Sinai to receive the 10 Commandments and the Torah at Shavuot was to build a fence around the mountain. Because otherwise, the temptation to run up that mountain and to get too close, it would be like flying directly into the sun. They say that at the moment before Torah was given to us, that the entire universe was still, silent. Not a bird chirped, not a bee buzzed, not a wing flapped. That silence, that deep silence, is how we hear the still, small voice that is inside of all of us. And those words that came to us when a huge shofar trumpet blasted and the mountain was smoking on top of us, and the fanfare made us so insane that our souls, they say, ran out of our bodies, and angels had to come twice and shove our souls back in so desperately. We were like a magnet, or like a piece of metal that was pulled towards the magnet, the source of all sources, God, our creator. So the people heard these commandments. They heard these commandments, the first two from God, and then they could no longer bear it. It was too intense. And the rest from Moses through God. And these 10 commandments are the basis of all moral decency from that time forward. If you took a look at the pagan world before Revelation at Sinai, you would see commonly murder, infanticide, all manner of subversion. In fact, if you just look back at the Colosseum in Rome, anybody who's ever been there before knows that they used to throw the Christians to the lions. They would have men, gladiators, fight to the death. Blood sport was normal. In fact, in the Colosseum, they had this fountain that was filled with perfume to get rid of the stench of blood that was everywhere. In the ancient world, life was cheap. It had no value. One of the things that Torah brought to the world was a reverence for life. Judaism is a religion that celebrates and sanctifies life. We are not a death cult. We do not yearn for the downfall of our enemies. All of you at the Passover Seder, when we remove the drops of wine from our cup, those 10 drops, we are remembering that even the evil Egyptians who chased us into the sea and wanted to take us back into slavery, they were destroyed. So much of the Egyptian nation was destroyed. And essentially what our rabbis are telling us is a Jew doesn't celebrate the loss and death of one of his creatures, ever. We don't celebrate death. We celebrate life. And so what I thought we would do today is just take a quick and modern look at those 10 commandments that changed the world, at the Torah that gave the world hospitals. They didn't exist. Education, it didn't exist. In the ancient world, almost everybody was unlettered. Only the Jews learned because reading and language was so powerful. Information, wisdom was the goal. So let's take a look at the first commandment, or Aseret HaDibrot, or the first statement. And it is not what you think it is. Everyone thinks it is just a question. But in fact, it's a statement. And the statement reads, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. Well, how's that a commandment? Isn't that a statement? Well, yes and yes. How so? I'd like you to look at the first word, I. I took you out of Egypt. And this is why the first lesson of accepting that you're not God and recognizing there's a power greater than yourself is to exchange an I for an I. It's not all about you. The first foundation of these statements is that God exists, perhaps not in the way that it was illustrated in kids' books with like a long beard sitting on a cloud somewhere. Not that God. Nobody believes in that God. Not people who have studied or matured in their spiritual understanding. But that message is much like I talked about on the trip in the prayer class, that we diminish our egos and we bow to some force greater than ourselves And we know that we're not God. And in doing that, we can stand straight. You exchange the I of the ego for the I took you out of Egypt. The first step to morality and decency is knowing you are not the center of the universe, that your needs, your time frame, your frustrations, your desires, it's not all about you. That there is something in this world greater and bigger than the individual yearning for comfort. An eye for an eye. I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. The Jewish people had to recognize that even Moses was his messenger. And even though the sea split and it appeared that nature helped them, and even though X, Y, and Z, in the end, all that happens to us is orchestrated by the master conductor. This is very humbling because most of us move through our life taking credit for every one of our achievements, denying the ones that we are not successful at. The first step of understanding humility, which is the gateway to joy and to learning, is to recognize it's not I. It's not all about me. The commandment is to know there's a God. It doesn't say believe in God. That's a Christian concept. To know, which means you hear this statement and then you go out and you learn. You search for the HP moments in your life. You study from minds greater than yourselves. You go and see the genius of creation and you will come to understand that you don't run the world, that God does. And that is foundational. The second statement, you shall have no other gods before me. Well, that's an interesting statement because what actually does it mean to worship idols? What does it mean to have other gods before you? So in a broader sense, I think that idolatry can include making almost any physical act into a god. What does that mean? Well, this is something else that we talked about. It's what Brene Brown calls hustling for worthiness. What is your God? Is it having children who are nachas machines? Is it getting your kids into the right college? Look what happened in Hollywood just this year, where two famous people with all of the means subverted the system and paid tons of money to get their children into colleges, which was, of course, exposed all over the media to their humiliation and likely to their children's humiliation. What kind of a God is education in our culture and society now, particularly college education, that we would be willing to subvert the law, to steal, to cheat, and to lie in order to ensure that our kid goes to the college where we feel they'll have the best chance to succeed? Well, we saw what happened there. Maybe it's physical fitness. For some people, they believe that their God is fitness, it's health. And if they are strong enough that nothing will ever happen to them, but my friends, how many people do you know in the prime of their life, physically healthy, never smoked a day in their life, eat only vegan, the best and the healthiest, who, God forbid, get some disease or drop dead of a heart attack or hit by a bus, God forbid? We must do our due diligence. Of course we must. But we don't control the outcome. You shouldn't have any other gods beyond God. It's important for you to know that while the first mitzvah applies to your mind, the second mitzvah, not to have any other gods, applies to your actions. Carefully examine yourself. What are you bowing to? To what are you kneeling? What takes up so much of your psychic space that you have elevated it above decency? Ask Felicity Hussman. I'm sure that she could tell you. The third, do not take God's name in vain. What does this mean? Well, I'm going to share a story of what this can look like. I'm going to fall on my own sword for it. It's not attractive, but I have to share it. Using God's name in vain is to swear as a witness in vain, to use God's name in the form of a lie. Now, once, many years ago, H&M opened in my city. We'd never had it here in Canada. And I went out and I bought a sweater and a shirt in a strange kind of salmon color, which I think was fashionable and I thought it was nice. So I went home, and for Shabbat morning that morning, oh, by the way, I left the tags on because I couldn't make a commitment. Didn't really realize that wasn't cool either. Left the tags on, put on the shirt, the sweater over it, and walked to synagogue, 40-minute walk, spent a few hours in synagogue, came home. Nobody said a word. It's the first time I'd worn something other than black, white, navy, or gray. Nobody said anything like, nice shirt, nice sweater, oh, that's new, what a nice color. Nothing, not a word, including my husband. Wait, I have to sneeze, hold on. Thanks. So I got home and I took it off and I put it on a hanger and I said to my husband, did you not like this top? He goes, to tell you the truth, not such a flattering color or shape. Sorry, honey. That's why I didn't say anything. And I thought, oh dear. So of course I quickly folded it up, put it back in the H&M bag with all the tissue over it, took the bag, and the next day I went to the mall to return it. There was a huge line up there. I stood in the line for 20 minutes until I got right to the front of the line. I handed the cashier the bag. There was 10 people behind me and 10 beside me. I handed the cashier the bag and I said, I'd like to return this. She said, okay. She opened it up and she started unfolding it. And she said, has this been worn? And I said, get ready. God, no. Charming, huh? With a wig on my head. That's how fast you can go from up there to scraping along the bottom of your shoe. That's using God's name in vain. Not only did I lie, I said, God, no. And I was mortified with myself. And I'd heard somewhere that if you humiliate yourself or you become humiliated and you don't react, you can pray for anything. So I stood there like an idiot and I'm going, okay, so I lied. I did wear it for a few hours, but nobody liked it. It got no positive comments. But I only had it on for like 3 hours. I just walked 20 minutes in it. I kept going on and on. Everybody else in the lineup was rolling their eyes at me. And the cashier said, it's okay. You can return it anyway. This is H&M. And I remember feeling like I wanted to vomit. We don't lie in God's name. How many times do we say, oh my God, yes, for sure? We want to be very careful that we don't attach or attribute lies to the name of the commander of the universe. We just don't do that. And we know because in a court of law, we get, did you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? There's a reason it's used that way, because in the old days, when the 10 Commandments still held sway in our culture, people knew you put your hand on the Bible and you swore you did not take God's name in vain. I shared that disgusting story about myself so that you will constantly be aware that no matter how spiritual and evolved you think you've gotten, just like that, you can fall to the bottom of the pit. That is number 3. Number 4, remember the Sabbath and sanctify it. Keep the Sabbath day holy. Remember the Sabbath. 2 different categories. You know, we are likely the only generation who desperately don't want a day of rest. When I was growing up, the stores were all closed on Sunday. It was the Christian day of rest in Canada. You couldn't get into a bar, you couldn't go to a restaurant, there was nothing flying. And I remember there was lobbying for Sunday opening. This has got to be something like 30 years ago now. And people went to jail for opening their stores and paid enormous fines and whatnot. It was a problem. Today, heads of technological corporations are telling their employees to unplug for 1 day a week. Maybe they're not saying Saturday, but they're saying for 1 day, disconnect in order to connect. I know that in this 24/7 world we look in and live in, it's really hard to imagine 24/6. We perceive that we'll miss something, that somehow we won't earn what we're supposed to earn if we're not working on Shabbat, that somehow we won't have the productivity that we need to, work for if we're not using all of our mode. But the lights burn in the atmosphere 24/7 and burning through our ozone layer. The ambient noise and light makes it impossible to sleep anywhere but the country. We stop creating for one day in order to remember that there is a creator. This goes back to number one, and it's not us. Honor and celebrate and keep the Sabbath. It was a gift to us, and we toss it back in his face. No thanks, I'd rather be a slave to the marketplace, to the world. I know that it's very difficult to honor and keep Shabbat. I also know it's not all or nothing. And if your children are small enough, it's not impossible for you to begin scaling back bit by bit to celebrate Shabbat and to celebrate the gift that God gave a slave nation when he said, yes, 24/7, you were responsible to Pharaoh, but now one day belongs to me. I don't know if you're aware of this, but for example, in, where's the Christmas tree, the big Christmas tree in New York City? Somebody type it in, Rockefeller Center. Rockefeller Center is a public space. It's a public space belonging to the city of New York, except it's still owned by Mr. Rockefeller. And one day a year, he has to close that center in order to maintain private ownership. And I'm telling you, one day a week, God says to us, this world is mine. It's not yours. You don't own it. And if you would just stop creative and productive activity and just let go and let God for one day a week, my gosh, the rejuvenation will give you the strength and the energy to make the other 6 exponentially greater. I know it's not all or nothing, but can you consider finding a way to mark, to remember, and to keep the Sabbath? It won't look the same for all of us, but to do it teaches you and your family the important and profound lesson that things continue even beyond and outside of your agitation. One day, if I have a chance, I would like to do a whole webinar on Shabbat and how I discovered how to keep it productive for me. Number 5, honor your mother and father. Now, I know this makes some people squirmy. And I know that if you had a rough relationship with your mother or your father, that anything that implies this becomes sticky. But let me remind you, it does not say love your mother and father. It says honor your mother and father. It doesn't say respect. It says honor. If you want to understand the power of this commandment, you have to learn what it means to honor a parent. The first thing it means is to recognize that life was given to you from 3 people. Well, 2 people, the mother and the father, and God as the third partner, where your soul came to earth into the body that was created through the parents. They gave you life. I have a friend who, someone saved her life once. And for the last 30 years, she has sent him every year on his birthday, massive display of flowers and a card and a thank you, thinks about him all the time. He saved her life one day in a swimming pool, and she's never forgotten him. How much more so that we were given life. And yes, it's possible that the parents that your soul was beshert to had struggles and disappointments and pain. But my friends, to give acknowledgement that the greatest gift we can ever receive is life, again, this is another full webinar. Nobody is telling you you have to like someone or have to tolerate abuse, God forbid. But you must speak carefully, gently, respectfully, decently. Don't scream at them. Take care of their needs. Feed them if necessary. Get them to their doctor's appointment. You don't have to be their best friends, but treat them with honor. And I'm going to tell you something. I struggled with my relationship with my mother my whole life. And when I learned this commandment, I realized that if I don't begin to treat my parents, my mother specifically, with honor, then I may as well be eating a pork chop on Yom Kippur while standing naked in the middle of Times Square. So what's the point? So I started to do that. I started to speak to her the way the Torah teaches us is respectful speech from a child to a parent. And you know what? She turned out to be pretty nice. It took me 51 years to figure out that perhaps I had some role in things. Again, another hour on how to honor your parents. And please let me know in the comments if you would like a webinar on this particular subject, how to honor your parents, even difficult ones. But the reason that it's there as number 5, between the mitzvahs that are between man and God and the ones that are between man and man, is because you will never, ever know how to relate to God until you understand how to honor what gave you life. Number 6, do not murder. Doesn't say do not kill. This is something that's often misunderstood. Do not murder is different than killing. We were told we have mastery over the animals, that we can, if done properly, eat meat. Now, this is a tenuous point for a lot of people, and I do know many people who will not eat meat for this reason. But you should know that's not forbidden to us. And killing is not forbidden. If someone is coming to kill you, you can kill them first. Murder is something else. Murder, I guess, how do I put this? It's a reminder that human life is of intimate and infinite value. When you look at what the ancient world used to look like, you'll see that people were sacrificing their virgin daughters to the river god in order to make rain. That you'll see that, infanticide was common. Oh, it's a girl. I don't like how she looks, down the well. They found thousands upon thousands upon thousands of infant corpses in wells when the archaeologists were digging through certain parts of Europe. Again, death is anathema to us. We are Kiddush HaChaim, sanctifiers of life. Number 7, don't commit adultery. So this one I know warrants hours. I know that in today's day and age, this is less dealt with, especially when we watch the Hollywood actors jump from relationship to relationship, where we all got firsthand knowledge of, Brad Pitt leaving Jen for Angelina and then her leaving him for this one, and how everybody's fooling around on everybody. And we have Ashley Madison and all those websites for cheating for married people. And that's what our culture looks like. It doesn't change the fact that fidelity, particularly in the home, is the cornerstone of morality in Jewish life. That fidelity to a spouse, that building a life together and to suppressing some of those physical desires, this is a high level. I think I've told many of you the story about the man who had 2 court jesters and taught both of them, and both of them had to learn different tricks to amuse the king. Well, one of the jesters taught his cat to serve tea to the king. This cat could stand on its hind legs, hold its paws up with a little silver tray with coffee and cream and little sugar cubes and all of that stuff, and the cat would be able to serve the king tea. Well, the other jester thought, well, this is not cool because there's no way I can do a trick as great as this, but he had an idea. So on the day that he was supposed to present the trick, the other jester watched as his competitor stood, his cat up, put the tray on him, and was about to open the curtain. He was starting to open the curtain in order to let the cat present to the king, and the guy reached into his pocket and he grabbed a mouse, and he dropped the mouse on the floor, and of course the cat dropped the tray and chased the mouse, because you can teach a cat tricks, but you can't teach it to go beyond its nature. But a human being does not have to drop the mouse. You may see in the course of your day other mice that look attractive to you, other mice that you wish you could have, other mice that seem like a better fit for you than the mouse you've got. But we don't have to drop the tray. We can delay gratification. We have the EQ, the emotional intelligence, to understand that there is a law that says you don't move on to that until you're done with this. Now, yes, there are people who have suffered and have made mistakes. And that is all correctable by teshuvah. But as a general principle, we believe in the seventh commandment because marriage is sacred. Number 8, do not steal. Now, this was originally about kidnapping, you should know. Capital punishment if there were witnesses, and the death penalty for kidnapping, but it has been extended to all forms of stealing, including the stealing of trust, including the stealing of someone's sanity, gaslighting, lying, taking things that don't belong to you. The fastest and easiest way to teach this to children is to stop eating the grapes and the cherries at the grocery store, or if you're going to have some of them, make sure you tell the cashier to add a couple of cents for the couple that you ate. Let your children see. They find a lost object, they return it. It's not just theirs. You don't take which isn't yours. Number 8, don't bear false witness. Lying in court. One of the worst injustices in the world is to pervert a verdict. And yet it happens all the time. This is something we're forbidden. Number 10, and I'm speeding through for a minute now, and we can go through separate webinars on all of these, is do not covet. Coveting is different than jealousy. Coveting is different than seeing something that someone has and wanting it. Truly coveting is not wanting the other person to have it at all. There's an expression, and it says, the baker is not jealous of the tailor's wonderful scissors. Because the baker has no use for the tailor's scissors. Just like you might like my glasses, but the prescription won't work for you. To covet what somebody else has is futile because it's not for you. Because God runs the world, and if it was for you, it would be yours. I'm going to give you a quick 10-figure little game that you can remember this by. Okay, ready? Let's go. 1, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. I'm just 1, echad, not 2, 1. 2, don't have other gods before me, not 2, not 2. 1, I'm the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. 2, do not have other gods before me, not 2 gods. 3, do not use God's name in vain. Oh my God. 4, keep the Sabbath, 2 challahs, 2 candles. 5, honor your mother and father, or they'll give you a spanking. Okay, let's just review. 1, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. Just one of them. 2, don't have any other gods before me, not 2. 3, don't use God's name in vain. Oh my God. 4, keep the Sabbath, 2 candles, 2 challahs on the table. Number 5, honor your mother and father, or you'll get a little slap. Number 6 is a 6-shooter. Do not murder. 6-shooter, get it? Number 7, the 7-year itch. Don't commit adultery. Number 8, an 8 turned on its side looks like handcuffs. Do not steal or you'll be in handcuffs. So let's review that. 5, honor your mother and father. You can get a little spanking. Number 6 is a 6-shooter. Do not murder. Number 7, the 7-year itch. Your 7 heaven. Marriage is heaven. Number 8, 8 turned on its side looks like handcuffs. If you steal, don't steal or you'll be in handcuffs. Number 9, don't bear false witness. If you imagine a 9 is an upside down 6. It's a 6 that's been turned upside down and represented as a 9. Don't bear false witness. And 10, do not covet. Gimme, gimme, gimme. So, from the start, 1, I'm the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. 2, do not have any other gods before me. 3, don't use God's name in vain. Oh my God. 4, honor and keep the Sabbath. 2 challahs, 2 candlesticks. 5, honor your mother and father or you're going to get a little slap. Number 6, 6-shooter. Do not murder. Number 7, the 7-year itch. Do not commit adultery. Number 8, handcuffs. There's an 8 on this side. Don't steal or you'll be in handcuffs. Number 9 is a fake and inverted 6. Don't bear false witness. And number 10, gimme, gimme, gimme. Do not covet. We stood at the foot of that mountain and we had revealed to us the voice and the sounds and the feel of the creator of the universe. These 10 commandments, which contain all 613 as subsets, formed what we call today as common decency, good, decent behavior, morality. People say to me all the time, well, you know what, I don't believe in that. I'm just a really good person. I keep the 10 commandments. That's yours. As Jewish people, you are custodians. You are the canary in the coal mine. You are the living, breathing example of those core values. And those 10 commandments, if you study each of them in depth, they concretize what it means to be a mensch. And remember, it is more important to do right than to be right. On Shavuot, as we eat that cheesecake and those blintzes, remember, commit yourself to a renewal of those commandments, of those values. Dig into them and discover what they are, what they mean. And last but not least, we have this very interesting tradition. It says that Moses had to wake up the children of Israel because they were sleeping when it was time for revelation at Mount Sinai. And as a correction for that, we have a custom to stay up all night, the night of the giving of Torah, which is coming up this Saturday night, right after Shabbat. Shavuot begins. It's a 2-day holiday. And there is a custom that we stay up all night to rectify the fact that we were almost ready to sleep through the greatest thing that mankind has ever experienced. So talk to your local community leaders, find out what's going on all the way through your community. There's got to be something. And may God bless all of us, with the clarity to know that we must represent goodness in the world. So one last time, 1, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. 2, do not have any other gods, not 2, just 1. 3, oh my God, don't use God's name in vain. 4, the Sabbath, 2 challahs, 2 candles. 5, honor your mother and father or you get a little touch. Number 6, a 6-shooter like a gun. Don't murder. Number 7, resist the 7-year itch. Do not commit adultery. Number 8 on its side looks like handcuffs. Don't steal or you'll be in handcuffs. Number 9 is a 6 that's been turned upside down. It's a misrepresented 6. Do not bear false witness. And 10 is don't covet. Gimme, 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 gimme. See if you can remember those. Teach them to your children. And please, this year on Shavuot, may we all achieve the greatness that God knows all of us have inside us. So good Yom Tov. Have a fantastic holiday. And thank you so much for being here with me. I will wait for one more minute in case somebody wants to ask me something on the side. Oh, Oh, you're so sweet. Okay. Just let me know if you want one more of the hand signals. I think we're good. Oh, bless all of you. I'm sending so much love. This is the forgotten holiday. Let's reclaim it. This is it. And everybody, phone your parents, even the difficult one. Okay. Bye-bye. Bless you.